I didn't go to my son's wedding anniversary dinner this year. I didn't bring the wine. I didn't book the private room at the restaurant. I didn't hand over my credit card at the end of the night with that quiet smile I'd practiced for 11 years. My name is Gord. Wait, no. My name is Mitchell Crane. I'm 54 years old. I live in Barrie, Ontario, and for 11 years I was the man who paid for every celebration in this family, while being treated like I was lucky to be included. The calls started coming in around 9 o'clock on a Saturday night in August. I remember sitting in the dark on my back deck, listening to the frogs down by the creek, letting the phone ring. I want to explain how I got there. How a man who used to drive 3 hours round trip to set up folding tables in a rented banquet hall ended up sitting alone in the dark, not answering his phone, feeling, and this is the part nobody warns you about, completely at peace. It started the year my son Kyle got married. Kyle, no. My son's name is, I need to get used to saying it plainly, my son. He was 31, she was 28. They'd been together 6 years, and honestly I liked her well enough at the beginning. She had this way of tilting her head when you talked, like she was genuinely listening. Turned out she was cataloging, not listening. But I didn't know that yet. The wedding was in Muskoka, not a small thing. 112 guests, a venue on the water, a caterer out of Toronto. My son came to me about 4 months before the date and said they were a bit short. His words, a bit short. Turns out a bit short meant $42,000 short. His mother and I had split when he was 9, and she lived out in Victoria, so it was just me. I was working as a senior project manager for a civil engineering firm, had a decent salary, owned my house outright. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He's my son. I didn't expect a parade. I want to be clear about that. I paid because I wanted to, because I could. And because watching him stand up at that altar was worth every cent. He looked like his grandfather. Same jaw, same way of standing with his weight on his left foot like he was bracing for something. I stood in the back near the doors and I cried in the good way, the way you're not embarrassed about later. What I didn't expect was that this was now my job, permanently, without discussion, without acknowledgement, without end. The first anniversary dinner was my idea, actually. I suggested it. Take them out somewhere nice. Just the three of us. Celebrate the year. I made a reservation at a steakhouse on Dunlop Street that I'd been to for client dinners, the kind of place where the booths are deep and the lighting is low, and a bottle of decent red runs $80 without apology. I paid. Gladly. It was a good night. By the second year, my daughter-in-law had added her parents. They were perfectly pleasant people from Sudbury, her father a retired plumber, her mother who taught elementary school and talked too much about her herb garden. We'd met at the wedding, exchanged numbers, never actually called each other. But now here they were, sitting across from me at a table for 6 at the same steakhouse, looking at the menu with the kind of wide-eyed attention that told me they didn't come to places like this often. I paid. I told myself it was generous. It was fine. By the 3rd year, they'd added their daughter, my daughter-in-law's younger sister, and her boyfriend, who worked in Fort McMurray, doing something with pipelines, and had opinions about the Ottawa Senators that he shared without being asked. Table for 8. The bill came to just over $1,100 with tax and tip. I put my card down. Nobody objected. Nobody offered. My son looked at me from across the table and said, "Thanks, Dad," and then immediately turned back to a conversation about something I wasn't part of. I drove home on the 400 that night, going over it in my head. Was I being unreasonable? This is what I do. I talk myself out of things. I tell myself I'm lucky to have a family that wants to gather, that plenty of men my age are eating frozen pasta alone in front of the news, that money isn't love, but spending it on people you love is close enough. I told myself all of that. I believed most of it. The 4th year, my daughter-in-law told me she'd been thinking, and I remember exactly how she said it. This bright, helpful voice like she was doing me a favor. She'd been thinking that maybe instead of the restaurant, we could rent out the private room at Creemore Kitchen, the one with the exposed brick and the Edison bulbs, because it would be more intimate. More intimate for 12 people. There was a new couple now, friends of my son's from university, and the sister's boyfriend had become the sister's fiancé, and his brother and the brother's girlfriend were visiting from Red Deer. I said that sounded lovely. I booked it. I put down my card for the deposit. The room rental was $600 before the food. The dinner was $2,300 and change. I didn't count the glasses of wine my daughter-in-law's sister's new fiancé consumed, but I noticed. The whole party noticed him, noticed the wine list. My son's wife came to me as people were putting on their coats and said quietly, just to me, leaning in a little the way she did when she wanted something to feel like a confidence, "This is becoming such a beautiful tradition." I smiled. I nodded. I thought, tradition, that's what we're calling it. I want to tell you the thing nobody else saw, the thing that took me years to name. I wasn't excluded from these nights. I was present at every single one. I sat at the head of the table, or near it. I poured wine. I made small talk with people I barely knew. I laughed at stories I didn't follow the beginning of. I was there. But I was there the way a function is there. The way a coat check is there. Or a parking garage. Something necessary that you don't actually think about. People don't feel warmly about a parking garage. They just need it to be there when they need it. The 5th year I asked my son, casually, maybe 3 weeks before the anniversary, if they wanted to do something smaller this time. Just us, maybe, the way it had started. He got a look on his face, not angry, not even surprised, more like confused, like I'd suggested we celebrate in a different language. "We can't do that now, Dad," he said. "Everyone's expecting it. Everyone." Meaning 15 people I was responsible for feeding in a private room with Edison bulbs. Year 6, my daughter-in-law mentioned, again with that tilted head, that helpful voice, that a few people had dietary restrictions this time, and did I mind if she helped choose the menu? She chose a prefix, $110 a head before wine. I did the math in the car on the way there. Did the math again sitting at the table. Smiled through all of it. Year 7, there's a year 7, God help me. Year 7, I was going through a rough patch at work. Not losing my job rough, but the firm had been restructured and my role had shifted. And I was working longer hours for slightly less satisfaction, and driving home some nights, feeling like I was slowly becoming someone I didn't recognize. I mentioned this to my son on the phone in March, casual, just in passing. The way fathers talk to sons, when they're not quite sure they're allowed to have problems anymore. He said, "That's tough, Dad," and then asked if I was still planning on the anniversary dinner in August, because his wife was already in touch with the venue. I held the phone and looked out the kitchen window at my backyard. "Yes," I said. "Of course." Year 8, one of the couples brought their baby. The baby was fine, babies are babies, but they'd set up this entire situation where the high chair had to go at a specific place at the table, and the evening got reorganized around nap times and feeding schedules, and at one point I was sitting at the far end of a long table that had migrated 3 feet to accommodate the stroller, watching my daughter-in-law take a photo of herself holding the baby, and I thought, I paid to not exist at my own dinner party. That thought didn't go away. Year 9. My daughter-in-law's parents announced at the dinner that they were planning a trip to Portugal in the fall, and wasn't that exciting? My daughter-in-law's sister and her husband, they'd gotten married in Portugal 2 years prior, a trip I'd also contributed to. Another story, talked about their favorite parts of Lisbon. The pipelines man, now domesticated into a husband, had taken up golf and talked about that for a while. My son refilled glasses and laughed at things and said, at one point, "Dad, you've barely touched your steak." I looked at him across the table and tried to remember the last time he'd asked me something about me. Not about logistics, not about bookings, about me. I said the steak was great. It cost me $2,600 that year. I remember because I looked at the itemized bill later, and I sat with it for a long time. Year 10 was the year I almost said something. We were standing outside after, waiting for taxis, that August air still warm at 10:30 at night. My daughter-in-law's father came up beside me. I always liked him well enough, this quiet man who smelled like Irish Spring and nodded more than he spoke, and he said, "You're a good man, Mitch, always doing this for the family." I turned to look at him, and then my son materialized at my elbow and said, "Hey Dad, next year can we do the week before, instead of the actual anniversary date? Easier for everyone's schedules." I said sure. Her father wandered off. I drove home. I took the long way, up past the lake, and I sat in my driveway for maybe 20 minutes with the engine off. The next fortnight, my younger brother, who lives in Guelph and has 3 kids and a chaos of a life, and the kind of steady common sense I've always depended on, without fully admitting it. I told him the whole thing, all 10 years. He listened without interrupting, which if you know my brother is almost supernatural. When I was done, he said, "So you're going to do it again next year?" It wasn't a question. "I don't know," I said. "Yes, you do," he said. He was right. I wasn't ready yet. There's a specific kind of not ready that comes from having invested so much over so long that stopping feels like admitting the whole thing was a mistake. Like if I stop now, I have to look back at the whole 11 years differently. I wasn't ready to do that looking. But something had shifted. Call it a hairline fracture. You don't feel it yet, but the structure has already changed. I started keeping a spreadsheet in March of that year. Not obsessively, just quietly. I went back through my banking records and my credit card statements and I added it up. 11 years. The wedding contribution. Every anniversary dinner. The Portugal wedding gift. A cottage rental one summer that I'd agreed to, and then somehow become the sole responsible party for. Birthday dinners that materialized. A shower for the first grandchild that I'd been told would be potluck and turned out to require a caterer. $81,400. Over 11 years. Most of it on a smile and a card placed on a table without anyone watching. I sat with that number for a long time. I want to be careful here, because I'm not telling you this to seem like a victim. I'm a grown man. I made choices. Every single time I made a choice. What I needed to understand was why I kept making the same one, and what it was actually buying me, because it wasn't buying me belonging. I'd been at the head of those tables and still felt like a vendor. It wasn't buying me closeness with my son. Our conversations had gradually become administrative. It wasn't buying me gratitude, not real gratitude, the kind where someone looks at you and sees the whole of what you've done. It was buying me continued inclusion in a structure that had been built around my willingness to pay for it. Take away the payment and I wasn't sure what was left. That was the thought that kept me up some nights. Not anger. Fear. But here's what I've learned, slowly and not without cost. The things we're afraid of losing are not always the things we think they are. In April of that year, I sat down and wrote a list on a yellow legal pad. Old habit from project management. I've always thought better with a pen. 2 columns, what I was getting, what I was giving up to get it. I didn't show it to anyone. I just looked at it for a while. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer of my bedside table, and I went to sleep. I didn't say anything to my son. I didn't send a message. I didn't float a trial balloon, or soften the landing, or any of the things I might have done in a different version of this story. I just made a decision quietly, the way you make decisions that are actually decisions and not negotiations. When my daughter-in-law texted me in June to ask if I'd already been in touch with Creamore Kitchen about the August date, I read the message. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter. I made a coffee. I stood at my kitchen window looking at the creek. I texted back, I won't be organizing the dinner this year. Hope you're able to put something together. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no softening clause. I didn't block anyone. I wasn't trying to manufacture a scene. I just said what was true and stopped there. 3 minutes later, the dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again, then nothing. My son called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. He said, "Hey Dad, just checking in, give me a call." His voice had that particular neutrality that means something is being very carefully managed. I called him back the next morning. "What's going on?" he said. "Nothing's going on," I said. "I just won't be organizing the dinner this year. Are you okay? Are you sick?" "I'm fine." "Then why? I've organized it for 11 years, I said. "I thought someone else might take a turn." Silence, and then, "Dad, you know how busy we are." I did know. I also knew that I'd organized dinners for up to 22 people while managing project deadlines and twice while grieving. Once my father, once a colleague and close friend who died too young. I knew how busy looked. This wasn't that. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I said, with as much warmth as I could put into it, because I wasn't trying to be cold. I was just done. He said he'd talk to his wife. I said okay. We hung up. His wife called me 2 days later. I want to describe her voice, because the voice told everything. It was her helpful voice, the tilted head voice, the voice that had, for 11 years, somehow been able to make requests sound like gifts she was giving me. "Mitch," she said, "I was thinking, since you've done it so many years, you probably have the contacts already. It would actually be less work for you than starting over for someone else. Does that make sense?" I almost laughed. I genuinely almost laughed. "It makes sense," I said. "I still won't be doing it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "The family is really counting on this. The family can book a restaurant," I said. "Any open table search will give you about 40 options within 20 minutes of your house." She said she'd need to think about this. I said that was fine. We hung up. Then came the others. Her mother called to tell me how much these dinners meant to the family. Her family, specifically. People I'd met at a wedding 11 years ago, and now apparently owed a catered annual event. Her tone was heard in that specific way. "That means I expected more from you." Her sister texted me a meme about family being everything, which I stared at for a while with genuine bewilderment. The pipelines man, I have no idea why he was involved, but here we were, sent me a message on Facebook that just said, "Come on, man." I didn't respond. My son called twice more. The second time, his voice had shifted from managed neutrality into something closer to frustration. He said he didn't understand why I was doing this. I said I wasn't doing anything. I was simply not doing something, which was different. He said that felt like a technicality. I said it felt like clarity to me. "You're punishing us," he said. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm not going to pay for the dinner this year. That's all. Do you know how much stress this is putting on us?" I held the phone and thought about that question for a moment. The stress of not having someone else plan and pay for your anniversary party. I turned it over. I looked at it from several angles. "I hope you're able to sort it out," I said. I meant it. August came. I took Friday afternoon off work and drove up to my brother's place in Guelph. His wife made pasta, and they opened 2 bottles of a Niagara Red that was better than it had any right to be at that price. And we sat on their back porch, and the kids ran in and out, and it was loud and chaotic, and nobody was performing anything for anybody. I helped with the dishes. I slept in the spare room with the window open. In the morning, my brother made eggs. I didn't think about the dinner until Saturday evening, sitting on their porch again, while the sun went down over the neighbors' maples. My brother said, without looking at me, "Tonight's the night, right?" "Yeah," I said. We sat with that for a while. My phone started at 9:07, my son first, then his wife, then, and I still can't entirely explain this, her father, the quiet man, the Irish Spring man, the one who'd called me a good man outside this restaurant. He left a voicemail. His voice sounded genuinely confused, like something he'd believed to be permanent had turned out not to be. He said he wasn't sure what had happened, but if I could call him back, that would be great. Her sister, the pipelines man again, someone whose number I didn't recognize, which I suspected was the boyfriend of one of the newer additions to this dinner I had never personally invited anyone to. My son left 3 messages total. By the third one, the management had dropped out of his voice, and what was left was something younger. Something I hadn't heard in years. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just said, "I don't understand, Dad. I really don't understand." I thought about calling him back right then. My brother looked at me and said, "Don't. Not don't ever. Just not yet." I called him the following Monday morning from my car, parked outside the office on Bayfield Street, coffee going cold in the cup holder. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he'd been waiting. "What happened to you?" he said. "Nothing happened to me," I said. "I've been right here. You missed the dinner. Everyone was asking about you. How did it go?" I asked. He paused. "Fine," he said. "Then we ended up at Jack Astor's." I didn't say anything. "It was fine," he said again. It wasn't what everyone was expecting." I asked him what everyone had been expecting. He didn't answer directly. He said people were disappointed. I asked who had paid. He said they'd split it. I said that sounded reasonable. There was a long silence. "Dad," he said, and something in his voice was different. Not the managed version, not the stressed version. Something older and quieter. "Did we treat you badly?" The creek behind my house sometimes freezes over in January, and one February morning a few years ago I was walking along it, and the ice shifted under my weight, just slightly, just enough that I could feel it was no longer solid. That sound, not quite a crack, more like a held breath released. That's what his voice sounded like when he asked me that. I took a long time to answer. "I think," I said, "that you let things become normal that shouldn't have been normal. And I think I let you, because I wasn't sure I was allowed to want anything different." He was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know it was that much," he said. I didn't think about it." "I know," I said. "And here is the thing about forgiveness. The part that seems counterintuitive until you live through it. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd been angry quietly, for probably 6 years without fully naming it. By the time I'd made the decision, the anger had done its work and left. What remained was something more like clarity. Like that first deep breath after a long time of shallow ones. We talked for 45 minutes. The longest conversation we'd had in years that wasn't about logistics. He asked if he could come up to Barrie the following weekend. Just him, not a dinner, not a thing, just the 2 of us. I said yes. He came on a Saturday. We drove out to Springwater Park and walked a trail through the woods that we'd walked when he was 8 or 9. Back when I used to take him out on weekend mornings while his mother slept in. He's taller than me now, by about 2 inches. He has my father's jaw, and he walks with his weight on his left foot, bracing for something. We talked about work. We talked about his marriage, which was, he admitted, going through its own adjustments. We talked about money in a way we'd never talked about money before. He apologized. Not a performed apology, not a managed one. The kind that comes with eye contact and some quiet after it. I told him I wasn't looking for an apology. I told him I just wanted to actually know each other. Not as the guy who books the venue and the son who shows up and thanks him on the way out, as people. He nodded. He walked a few steps without saying anything. I think I've been taking the easy version of having a father, he said. I've thought about that sentence a lot since then. The easy version. How many of us offer the easy version of ourselves and call it love? Because the real version requires being known, and being known requires asking, and asking requires the humility to admit you don't already know everything you should. His wife called me 2 weeks after that walk. Her voice was different, not the helpful voice, not the tilted head voice. Quieter. She said she wanted to apologize for how the summer had gone. She said she'd been thinking about it. She said she realized, only now that she had to think about it herself, what went into organizing something like that every year. I told her I appreciated that, I meant it. We're not the same as we were. I don't think we should be. This coming August they're organizing a dinner themselves. Smaller, just the immediate family, no extended guests, no private rooms, no prefix. My daughter-in-law asked if I'd like to come. I said yes. She asked if I had any preferences. I said good company and something simple. She asked who should make the reservation. I said that was up to her. She laughed. A real one, not a performed one. I'll go. I'm looking forward to it in a way I haven't looked forward to one of these evenings in years. Because for the first time I'll be going as a person who was invited, not a function that was required. The frogs are back down by the creek. It's been a dry summer so far, but they're making do. I sit on my deck sometimes in the evenings with a beer. Nothing fancy, a Canadian or a Sleeman, whatever's in the fridge. And I listen to them, and I think about the difference between being needed and being wanted, and how for a long time I confused them. I don't anymore. The day I stopped paying was the day I started being worth something to them that money couldn't replace.